You're listening to another episode of Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. This is the place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Well, waiting for a hot one this week. So my advice to you, stay cool, stay in the AC, and binge on some Mr. Allard Neighborhood episodes. Had one out on Thursday. I think it's still relevant and pertinent. It should be on Apple and Google now about the Trump indictment and things of that nature. Today, we're going to talk about what was going on in Russia. And if I knew exactly what was going on in Russia, I wouldn't be with you guys. I'd be on Beat the Press. But this is just what I've been gathering over the last 2 days. But it's a pretty significant event, even if it's a lot of hair pulling and what Shakespeare said, sound and fury signifying nothing. I think it does signify something. So we'll see. How about for you, Taylor? You nice and cool over there?
Oh yeah, my electricity bill is going to be so high, but it feels so nice inside right now.
Yeah, I know. I'm dreading it too. Being on the co-op, I do have probably a little bit better deal than our friends in the city, but still, basically, you're going to have to sell a kidney, baby, to pay off the summer electric bills.
Let's maybe not do that.
Yeah, okay. Well, I get desperate. Anyway, this week, though, is going to be a little shortened week. Tomorrow is my birthday, so I'm going to take the day off. I had Shandy scheduled, but then she has a closing. My daughter's closing. She's Shandy's selling my daughter's house. And I tell you what, I couldn't be a real estate agent. I really couldn't. Not because of the competition, which is plenty hard enough. It's because just all these details. I mean, it's just, trying to get all the ducks in a row to get the lender and the title and the voodoo witch doctor that has to bless it and all this other stuff all in the same place at the same time. No, it's not what I would want to do. And then on Thursday, I have Jennifer Woods talking about the summer plans for Harvest House. So there's going to be a lot going on there, and particularly in this hot weather. The need's going to be high, as always. We'll be talking about that. But before we dive into the deep end of the pool, all this Russia business, let's talk about our sponsors. Thank you to CrossFit Burleson, who has, like I've been talking about, has had a change of ownership with, go talk to Lexi and Bailey over there, and they got some plans. They still have a lot of the same programs. It's not going to be dramatic changes or anything like that. It'll still be the CrossFit you've always enjoyed, but check out their website for new programs and for membership plans and times, classes, things of that nature. I had them on about 2.5 weeks ago. They're very lovely young ladies, and it was a really good conversation because we talked also about the CrossFit activity itself. So check out CrossFit Burleson, 317 Southwest Wilshire. And like I mentioned, Shandy, she's busy, which is a good thing. Thank you to all she's done for our family. I've really gotten a good inside look at how she operates, and it's just very methodical, logical. Takes care of business. Thank you, Shandy, for all your helping with our family and for the rest of you help you for the community. Thank you also to Otto. I was there last Thursday. Usual great service, usual great time. Wonderful people. I think if I remember right, I'll be there next week as well. Also, it's like I said, it's 4th of July. So if you wanted some sort of treat for yourself, it's a good place to do it at. So thank you, our place. Also, Chris Notaboom over at Wild Cigar and Culture. There is an article in the latest, Burleson Buzz. Our friend Cody O'Brien has put out an article, and it features Chris at Wild Cigar. It's on the screen right now. But if you're listening to this on podcast, you're not seeing it, obviously, but check out. It's on Burleson Buzz and has a really nice article, well written. Chris was very excited about it when I was texting with him earlier. So he did a really good job on this. So if you want to know more about Wild Cigar, that article will do better than anything I can do. So thank you to Cody and thank you to Chris. Thank you to Tiffany. Also, a week from tomorrow, she has the party at the Pavilion. So check out Local Life Magazine and check out locallifetx.com for the QR code for the party on the Pavilion. You'll have games, you'll have vendors, you'll have food, and you'll have a great seat for the fireworks show. And so it's a good place. Check that out. Thank you, Tiffany. I know she's very busy this summer. I was texting with her last week, and it's like, between the magazine and this party and spending time with her family, it's keeping her busy. Also, thank you to Gail at Southern Gym. They're moving as we speak. I mean, little by little, piece by piece. The cabinets are supposed to arrive this week, and when the cabinets come in, then they can probably be closer to opening. But they have gone through a lot trying to get this thing opened up. But they are moving cabinets and whatnot. So check out Southern Gym. It's still on the 3rd floor, but soon to be on the 1st floor of the Windmiller Building. Thank you also to our friends, Old Pro Roofing and John Williams, 817-734-2756. He checked my roof out about a week ago Friday. No damage, thankfully, from the hailstorm we had. But see, my endorsement of him is he told me there was no damage. He wasn't trying to upsell me. He wouldn't say, "Oh, my Lord, you're about to fall in on itself," and blah, blah, blah. He was straight up honest with what my needs were and were not. And so 817-734-2756 for an honest evaluation. Same with Melissa's. She's checked out my insurance, said she could save me some money, and she did. And she upped my insurance as well. She's with Texas Farm Bureau, who has some of the highest ratings of customer service at 682-804-0534 and at 682-804-0534. And she'll check out your insurance. And if she can help you, she'll tell you. And if she can't, she'll tell you that too. So there you go. Thank you, Melissa. Also, our friends Lisa and Morris over at Stop Restoration. It's where they get it right the first time. And if you have some sort of water damage, and it doesn't have to be a disaster storm. It doesn't have to be a tornado or some sort of big hailstorm. Water heater leaking, a toilet leaking, a dishwasher leaking, whatever, and you don't even know it. Maybe your shower's leaking and they have water damage behind the tile. They'll check all of that. They're certified mold specialists. And also they handle fire damage, they hear other environmental hazards. And so they're the people to talk to. So give them a holler if you need to have some repairs done on your house, and restored the way it was before. And I think that's it for the rest. Like I mentioned, the party next week, you might want to check that out. Here's the drill. Friday night, actually. It's Friday night. I'm just kind of perusing. I don't hang on the internet all day long waiting for news to pop up. But they had a situation where Bang had a special news report. And what I saw was that basically an attempted coup is about to take place. That this Evgeny Prigozhin was marching with the Wagner Group up towards Moscow. Now, we need to know who the Wagner Group is and who Prigozhin is before we really understand it. But here's another thing. The template I'm going to use is not going to be comparing it to previous historical events and whatever else. It's really more like a Godfather series move. It's more like the mafia, because that's what the Russian state is. It's organized crime and power. The Russian state, the oligarchy that governs Russia, is nothing more than organized crime. The people that are associated with Putin got there by not just supporting him politically, but he got there basically, they got there by dominating certain industries within Russia. And that's what happens with Prigozhin. He is one of these particular type of Godfather type figures in the catering business, as it turns out. What that has to do with military tactics, I have no idea. But the point is that this is more like a mafia hit than it was a coup d'etat. And the title, "No One to Root For," I think is an accurate one, because nobody in this narrative is in any way, shape, or form a good, decent person. Okay, there's not a single actor in this narrative that is worthy of our support, worthy of our good thoughts, prayers, and feelings, because they are absolutely vicious and brutal. And so for us to be rooting for Prigozhin or rooting for Putin, that's no pun or rhyme intended, would be a waste of your time. If Putin had fallen during this episode and been replaced by somebody else, Prigozhin or somebody else, it's not like the war in Ukraine would come to a halt and that they would, start acting like a proper character in world events and cease their ambitions or whatever else. It just another one like Putin will take their place. So that's why the title, "No One to Root For." But first of all, let's talk about who Yevgeny Prigozhin is. He is, what's a good way of putting it in a polite show? He's a terrible, terrible human being. Always has been. He has a very, very vicious, violent past. He's been a criminal all his life. All right. And when he was in his late teens, he was put in jail in 1981 by the Soviets on charges of robbery, fraud, and the prostitution of minors. So he was a pimp for minors. That tells you what kind of person he is. He spent 12 years in the joint and finally was let go in 93. How he got his money is he started off literally with a hot dog stand in St. Petersburg, which Putin really liked, apparently, and he became known as, quote, Putin's chef, even though he's no chef in any sense of the word. He took over the catering businesses in St. Petersburg and then ultimately Russia. He caters all the Kremlin events. He also is a main supplier of a lot of the food programs in the Russian schools, and it's of course scandalous and fraudulent and all the rest. But he made his billions basically providing catering type services, and then he also branched into other little episodes as well. With his billions, he also started a group called the Wagner Group, named after the German composer Wagner. For whatever reason, I don't know. The Wagner Group is a mercenary army. It's a private security army. It's been compared to Blackstone, but Blackstone ain't anything like this in terms of the people it hires and what it does. Blackstone is security, and there's controversies about how much money they're getting paid and blah, blah, blah. But as far as the Wagner Group, that's where the comparison ends. This is a mercenary army of international thugs, hoodlums, and just violent people. And they're active not just in the Ukraine, but all over the world. Africa, like the Central African Republic. They're very active in Syria. In fact, some of the soldiers in the Wagner Group fighting in Ukraine are from Syria or from Libya or from the Central African Republic. So not all of the Russian or soldiers rather in the Wagner Group are Russian. And where also they get a lot of their mercenaries is from the Russian prisons. Some of the very worst of them. They will go through there and find the psychopaths and the murderers and the serial killers, and they'll say, we'll give you a pardon if you join our group. And so it is estimated to be between 25 to 50,000 soldiers. And they are basically similar to Putin's private army, if you will. Now, this isn't as uncommon in Russia as we may think it is. A lot of these other massive oligarchies have their own militia as well, like the Gazprom, which is their gas and oil monopoly, has its own militia as well, similar to this. And so this is not as unusual as it sounds for them. For us, it's very unusual. But anyway, they have this motley crew of prisoners and foreigners and psychopaths at several countries in the world. And how they get financing isn't just through Russian subsidies, but also they are involved in organized crime in Syria and in Africa and other places as well. They are involved in the illegal diamond trade, for example. They are involved in taking over oil and gas industries in some of these other countries, things of that nature. Now, there's another thing he's involved in as well. In 2016, we had all this discussion about how much Russian influence in the election, which, the investigations in Mueller and others have shown it was negligible, but it was not to say it wasn't attempted. Prigozhin also financed what is called the Internet Research Agency in Russia, and this is the troll farm that the Democrats accused of trying to swing the election towards Trump. And they are responsible not just for the 2016 business, but also all sorts of attempts to spread false information through social media worldwide. So he is the financier and creator of that troll farm, as they call it, in Moscow, where they send out all this misinformation and propaganda. So he's involved up to his neck in all this various activities. So he's just he's involved in a great deal of terrible, terrible things. Now, as far as what happened Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we still don't know all the details. I mean, there's no way to know it right now. We may never know the details. In fact, it's not like they're going to give us a detailed explanation. But what had happened is that for months, Prigozhin has been criticizing very, very sharply the Russian military leadership. The leader of the Russian military is a guy named Sergei, and I hope I pronounced his name right, Shoigu. I'm just going to go with that. Sergei Shoigu is their military leader, and he's been criticizing him by name and all the other leaders and also some of the other oligarchs in this little cabal of Putin's. He's claimed that the Russians have skimped on their supplies. They have not supported them with air reconnaissance and air support of any kind. They said that they have given them faulty weapons and bad food and on. And he is constantly criticizing. He also, last week, prior to this event, publicly stated that this war in Ukraine was useless, that there was no threat to Russia at all, and this war was a mistake. So he basically undercut and undermined Putin's rationale that, Ukraine's this fascist state that's going to take over and all this other crap. But basically, he just cut right through it, and Russian media picked up on it, and basically now it's caused Putin a lot of angst because a lot of the Russian people already had misgivings about this war, and to have one of their main combatants say it was all a mistake, it'd be very similar to like one of our main generals in Vietnam saying the same thing, which eventually they did towards the end. But that being said, what was the breaking point apparently was that about 2 weeks ago in a military confrontation between Wagner's and the Ukrainian army, that Ukrainian assault that's taking place right now, he claimed that the Russians actually bombed the Wagner group and not the Ukrainians, that the ordnance fell short and the airplanes bombed the wrong group. And he says that was not an accident. He says that friendly fire was intentional, that they were trying to destroy the Wagners. And so a couple of weeks ago, about 10 days ago, he comes out and says that, the Russian military tried to destroy their own army. There's a lot of conflict between these mercenary groups and the Russian military in so many different ways. The Russian military is crap. Okay, let's be really honest about it. The thing about it, the two things that Russia's ever had in terms of military assets is just lots and lots and lots of men and lots and lots and lots of land. And so it's very difficult to take over. This happened in the Napoleonic Wars. This happened in World War I and World War II, where both the number of Russians killed was staggering, but because of the huge size, and then of course the weather in the Napoleon events and in Stalingrad and all this other stuff, it made Russia very, very, very difficult to take over. But it doesn't mean they had this great army. They lost 20 million men and women in this war in World War II. And they've lost a bunch of men in this Ukrainian war. It's been estimated 250,000. To put that in perspective, that is almost as many men as we lost in Vietnam. And as far as killed, we number of men killed in Vietnam is around 58,000. They estimate that about half of these casualties are fatalities. So they've already lost more men in this 18-month misadventure than we lost in the entirety of Vietnam. Or Korea, for that matter. They're approaching numbers that we lost in World War I. Now, but the real conflict between the Wagner Group and the Russian military is you got these mercenary armies, and they're in it for fun and profit. They're not in it for the glory of Russia. They're not in it for the support of Russian Orthodox theology or Russian political nationalism or any of that business. They're in it for the buck, and they're in it a lot of them are in it for the chaos and the mayhem. But they're not supported very well at all. They destroyed the city of Bakhmut last month because they couldn't take it, and Prigozhin was embarrassed by that. The Ukrainians outfought the Wagners, even though they ended up losing the territory. Bakhmut was so devastated that basically all they have is uninhabited rubble left there. And the Ukrainian army didn't just fight the Wagners to a standstill, they beat them. And Prigozhin was very embarrassed by that. And so he blames Putin and he blames the Russian military establishment and all this other stuff, which is probably a big reason why he made that march. So I hope I've laid out their possible rationales. But what happened Friday? Well, the Wagner Group took over the Russian city of Rostov, which is right directly across the straits that lead to the Crimean Peninsula, okay? Sevastopol and other areas in the Crimea. Rostov is the jumping off point for a lot of the southern part of the invasion. Most of your invasion supplies and manpower go through Rostov. It's right on the coast. They cross the straits around the Black Sea, and they go into Crimea, which they've had since 2014. So capturing Rostov isn't just significant that it's a 1 million person city, but it's like capturing Fort Hood. I mean, it's a main supply depot in southern Russia. So when I first heard about this, I thought this is going to be a brutal wipeout. I mean, the Russian military, as incompetent as it is, has more men and equipment. Not necessarily so, because by the capture of Rostov, they captured a ton of military equipment. And then they began marching up the main highway in that region of Russia. It's called the M4, and they were heading to Moscow. It's about a 400-mile trek, and they got within 150 miles of it. And what was happening, Friday night, Saturday morning, our time, is that as they were approaching Moscow, the Russian army was supposed to be setting up roadblocks and getting prepared for an attempted coup. And basically, many of the roadblocks just said, "Come on by." And they just let them go through without firing a shot or slowing them down one iota. And that many of the people in Rostov and many of the soldiers along this route in Rostov also were seen cheering the Wagner Group as they approached Moscow. That's what to me was really, really significant, is the fact that here you have a situation where you would think that the Russian army would be gearing up to stop this invasion. And what it showed is the very, very poor control Putin has over the military and over the allegiance of his soldiers. Okay, that was that was significant to me. Now, I'm going to be quoting from several articles: National Review, Wall Street Journal, The Post, The Times. Those are the four mainly I use from. They had really good information. Here's one from the National Review. But sacking the city of Rostov, a key strategic and logistical hub located on the other side of the border from the occupied Ukrainian city of Mariupol, which we saw last year get totally leveled, will only complicate the Russian effort and frustrate one of its most important supply lines in the southern Ukraine. So we're not talking about something some minor city. The National Review says it's a city about approximately the size of Jacksonville, Florida, in terms of size, and near the same in population. And it's about as far away from Washington as Rostov is from Moscow. So they made that comparison. There's all the speculation why he did this, but one of them was that he thought that the Russian soldiers would lay down their arms or join the Wagner Group. Some did. Okay. And that part was true. And because he thought that probably that they would be willing to join him, and some did, because the Wagner Group probably is better fed and has more fighting spirit, shall we say, than the Russians. The Russians, from every aspect of what I've read, the morale and the performance is just abysmal. But that's a side note. Also, here's another characteristic about the Wagner Group that I thought was interesting. Because what happened in on this is from Atlantic Monthly, a guy named Tom Nichols, who's written several stories in the last few days about it. Prigozhin is cynical, brutal, and violent. He and his men are motivated by money and self-interest. They are angry at the corruption of the top brass, the bad equipment provided to them, the incredible number of lives wasted. And that's true. They've taken a great deal of the casualties. They aren't Christian, and they don't care about Peter the Great. Prigozhin is offering them a psychologically comfortable explanation for their current predicament. They failed to defeat Ukraine because they were betrayed by their leaders, like I mentioned about Bakhmut. So there you go. Well, anyway, for whatever reason, about halfway up this route, Prigozhin changed his mind. Was it cold feet? Was it that he got a message to stand down from? Is it that he thought that maybe this was, after all, a bit more than he cared to do? Maybe he thought that the other Russian oligarchs would join his side, did not. And so almost abruptly, he had the Wagner Group stand down, and within an hour or so, he accepted exile into Belarus with their president, Alexander Lukashenko, who is kind of like an intermediary between Putin and Prigozhin. Lukashenko is no prize either, but that's a whole other story. And so he took this exile with the promise of a pardon for him and his men, which they got. The charges were dropped. But it was rather abrupt. And people just have to speculate why that is. From what I've read, my personal speculation is that Prigozhin was counting on more support from that mobster gang that surrounds Putin, and he did not get it. And when he found out that he basically would be on his own for this, he just cut a deal instead. This is the mafia aspect of all of this, though. What Prigozhin was not attempting, what he was attempting was, try it again, dum-dum. what he was attempting was not a coup d'etat so Prigozhin could take over military power and whatever. This was an attempt to take over the organized crime outfit that is the Russian government. And he thought if he could cut deals with some of the other mobsters in that group, they would make him the top capo. And whether or not the war in Ukraine would continue or not is anybody's guess. But when he found out he did not get the support, he realized he was on his own. And so he made a deal with another mafia don, Lukashenko. And that's what the smart guys are speculating. They don't know, but they're speculating. Maybe Prigozhin took a look at the logistics of it and thought he wouldn't be able to withstand for long in Moscow. Putin was calling up the National Guard, or their version of it, and also a bunch of conscripts, which may or may not have fought for Putin. Who knows? But there you go. Nichols goes on to say this about Prigozhin, though, about the deal he just cut. Prigozhin gets to stay alive at least for the moment, and I'll mention that in a minute. But his life as he knew it, and maybe in any sense, is over. Putin, however, is now politically weaker than ever. The once unchallengeable Tsar is no longer invincible. The master of the Kremlin had to make a deal with a convict, again in Putin's culture, among the lowest of the low, just to avert the shock and embarrassment of an armed march into the Russian capital while other Russians are fighting on the front lines in the Ukraine. And so the real loser on all this would be Putin eventually. Now, it is unlikely to me that you'll see Mr. Prigozhin by the end of this calendar year alive. This, like I said, this isn't a government that operates like a government, operates like a criminal enterprise. And Putin has eliminated through jail and through assassination many of his political enemies. You know, the poisoning of suspected traitors, spies, competitors there are numerous examples. I would not be surprised one iota if Lukashenko breaks a deal with Prigozhin and hands him over to Putin, and they'll go either through a show trial, or they'll find him mysteriously dead in his cell, or something along those lines. So that the real loser, like I said, with all of this was Putin. The other loser is going to be the Ukrainian war effort for the Russian people. It's going to be very, very difficult to continue to try to rally the Russian people for this enterprise, whose support for this already was lukewarm. I mean, yeah, you see the nationalistic rallies and you see the media and whatever else. That's all propaganda for the most part. Those are state-created things. The Russian people, for the most part, are either uninformed or unaware of what's going on, or they're being told such different versions of the truth that they don't understand the true situation. Or if they have access to outside media and outside contacts, they understand that what's happening in Ukraine is an international crime, and many of them don't support it. But the thing about it is they can't do much about it. It is illegal and a jailable offense up to 10 years in Russia to refer to what's going on in public media as war. If you call it a war, like on your Facebook page or whatever Russia passes for, or whatever the social media in Russia, if you call it a war in Ukraine, they will come and arrest you and throw you in jail, and you'll be in there for several years. You can call it a military exercise, is about as far as it allows. So they don't tolerate any dissension about what's going on over there. But the thing about it is, Prigozhin let the kind of burst the bubble here. And here again, I'm quoting Mr. Nichols. Prigozhin told the truth flat out in the days before his march on Moscow. Ukraine didn't threaten Russia, and Russia's invasion was unnecessary, a mistake of epic proportions. So he basically said the emperor has no clothes kind of thing. That will not stand. And the thing about it, if it does stand, if Prigozhin is allowed to continue with statements and be seen in public and making YouTube videos or whatever else, he will be eliminated, because he basically exposed to the world Putin's lack of control over his own situation. Putin has built his entire reputation on manliness and testosterone. That's all those pictures of him with no shirt on, and that he is in control. He's basically the czar that the Russian people always thought they had. And now he's been shown to be just another crony and hack. And that's going to be a real problem. David Ignatius of the Washington Post, whom I read for foreign events, is a pretty good author. I mean, he's had some good articles. He says the speed at which Putin backed down suggests that his sense of vulnerability might be higher than even analysts believed. Putin might have saved his regime Saturday, but this day will be remembered as part of the unraveling of Russia as a great power, which will be Putin's true legacy. According to the analysts, Putin lives in complete, total paranoia of assassination. And that's why his security is so high, and they test his food and all this other routine, just like you see in some sort of Renaissance drama or whatever. Putin basically lives in an incredibly paranoid state, which is the hallmark of organized crime outfits. He lives trying to project strength and put fear in the hearts of his enemies, and this event burst that image. And the scenes of Russian soldiers and Russian people in Rostov and other places cheering on the Wagner Group could not have been missed by him at all. Okay, another one of these Russian analysts, I'm going to quote him from the Nature article, and the guy named, I hope I'm saying this right, whatever, his first name's Andre, that's good enough. The entire system is lost yesterday, including Prigozhin, who is also part of the system. It turned out the czar is not a real czar because he could not control a man from his own system who is supposed to be under his full control. This is from the Wall Street Journal, actually. That's the real impact of what happened this weekend. Will this be a turn point in the Russian invasion of Ukraine? We can only speculate. We don't know. We'll know in the aftermath. But the point is that I don't think the Russian people are going to see Putin in the same way, nor are they going to see this war in the same way, nor are their men in the military going to be as willing to be used as cannon fodder, which is exactly what they are in this war, which is exactly what happened in World War II and exactly what happened in World War I. One of the main reasons why the Russians revolted in 1917, and they went briefly to a socialist state, and then 9 months later, the Bolsheviks take over. The main reason why the entire war effort in World War I collapsed is the Russian soldiers said, we're not going to fight. We're tired of being just blown to flinders for the Russian state when we're not getting any support. And so the hundreds of thousands and going into the millions of casualties was one of the main catalysts for the Russian Revolution of 1917. And I think something similar is going to happen here. Now, I don't know if the events will play out the same way and whatnot, but I do believe that the Russian people are going to start asking them a lot harder questions about what's going on in this war. And they're not going to trust their media nearly as much as they did. And they are going to be less and less and less willing to join the military. Most of these, the Russians that have, quote, joined have been conscripts and forcible draftees. That's why they say that the Russian population of draftable men, you've had over 300,000 men immigrate to other countries in that region because they don't want to be drafted. Very similar to what happened in Vietnam for us. This Ukraine war in some ways does represent their Vietnam, because you get a war of that's become questioned, put it that way, questionable reasons. I'm not saying Vietnam is questionable, but the way we conducted it certainly was. But the point is that we had an experience similar to this that they're going to go through now. They're going to go through, and the people are going to start questioning. You're going to have more and more resistance to the draft. You're going to have more and more families saying, no, you can't have my son. And I have a real strong feeling by the end of this calendar year, you're going to hear more and more episodes in the American media about unrest in Russia. And the oligarchs don't look at this as the expression of people's true feelings and democracy and all this other crapola. They see it as bad for business. And if Putin's no longer good for their business, if Putin no longer keeps them in their place, in their position of power, and the untold billions that they have squandered not squandered is not the word, stolen is probably the best word I could come up with, the untold billions these people have confiscated from the Russian economy and the Russian people, if he's no longer providing them with that kind of situation, they'll get rid of Putin. You can bet your life on it. Now, the guy that would replace Putin in terms of its order of secession is their prime minister, who is a guy named Mistushin, I believe, and has zero ambitions of being in Putin's place. So he would not be the person that would be running this. It'd be some sort of sham election where the oligarchs would create choose from amongst themselves somebody to succeed Putin. That's why you should look at this as an organized crime thing. You're not going to have an uprising of the Russian people that demand a new election and they will choose somebody else and they'll take them a different direction. What you're going to have is Putin, one way or the other, probably knocked off. There's no retirement plan in the Russian system. It's like in the mafia. There is no retirement plan. You don't go retire and go to Florida. You're in it till you're not in it. And usually that means you're out feet first. And that's what's going to happen to Putin, I believe, one way or the other. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Because this is how they operate. But as far as what this does for the Ukrainian situation, it can't help but help, so to speak, the morale and the dedication the Ukrainians have shown in this war already. I think that that's been one of the main reasons why this war, which by all, if you looked at it from the beginning, thought, my goodness, Russia's going to go in there and take over Kyiv in about a week and all the other main areas in about a month, and you'll be good to go. And that's why this war has been an utter and total catastrophe for Russia. They've been exposed as a weak power with nuclear bombs, unfortunately. A lot of the analysts are comparing Russia now to North Korea, run by a madman with nuclear weapons that does not have the ability to really do anything but cause major damage, but is not able to influence national events. Russia is weaker now than at probably any other point since the ending of the communist state, which wasn't that strong to begin with. The Russian economy is in tatters. The life expectancy has gone down 15 years for men in the last 22 decades. 15 years decline. Why? The amount of alcoholism and vodka consumption is staggering. And here's a side note about the oligarchy type situation. Putin is the majority owner in the state monopoly on vodka. And that's replicated throughout all their industries. And so the health and the criminal aspect and the lifestyle of the Russian is much worse now than it's been in 20 years. And I don't know how long it's going to last without some sort of consequence or some sort of tragic conclusion, maybe even for us. Now, I was asked here about what did Biden do? He did the right thing. He did nothing. There's nothing he could have done. I'm really not making a criticism of Biden as such, even though y'all, I think, have a pretty good understanding of how I feel about him, but there's nothing he could have done. Basically, they just had to monitor and see what happened. There's no way they could have shaped events. The idea of supporting Prigozhin would have been catastrophic. That's the word I want to use. Certainly, they're not going to support Putin. But the idea that we give Prigozhin support or sympathy or anything else would have been an exceptionally bad idea. That's why I said there's no one to root for. It's like rooting between Hitler and Stalin. And so, in a very literal sense. So basically, all this also unfolded much too quickly for us to really have some sort of approach. According to, I read in the New York Times, the American intelligence suspected this could happen about a week ago, but that's not the same thing as being able to predict it to the day. But they said that Prigozhin was already revving up for something like this. So they had an idea that this was happening. But as far as being able to react to it or anything, had nothing. Okay, I'm going to finish this up now because I think I've explained everything I can. Here's what I'd say in summary. You may not see anything in the next day or week or so that is as momentous as you saw this past weekend. But what happened this past weekend, I think when this whole episode is said and done, it's going to be seen as the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin and the beginning of the end for their war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin was shown to be weak. He basically hid. He had to cut a deal with a convict. He had to get a third party to basically help negotiate the situation because he could not negotiate it himself for various reasons. He saw the Russian people's total apathy and or antipathy towards this war in Rostov and all these other areas as they were marching to Moscow. He has seen that here you have somebody that he thought was one of his personal allies. They called him Putin's chef for all these years, and Putin made Prigozhin, and he turns on him like this. And Prigozhin is not the only one. The other oligarchs are going to be on Putin's side as long as the money and their position and their villas are intact. And once those are threatened, goodbye to Vladimir Putin in a real sense. Like I said, this isn't going to be like what the Soviets did with Khrushchev, where they basically exiled him internally. No, that's not it. That's, again, like the mafia. There's only one way out. Same with Prigozhin. If they haven't had attempts on him or a poisoning episode or whatever by the end of this calendar year, I'll be shocked. And I'm not going to be upset. Like I said, there's no one to root for in this. And as far as the United States is concerned, in my opinion, I fully support our approach in Ukraine. Not everybody does. A lot of people have misgivings of it. People that are smart and intelligent have misgivings about it. I personally respect their opinions. But on the other hand, I still think we need to be on the side of Zelensky and the rest of the Ukrainians. So there you are. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them here. I'll be glad to answer them. Like I said, tomorrow I'll be off. And then Thursday we have Jennifer Woods from Harvest House, and we talk about what's going on in Burleson during this hot summer. I hope to hear from you then. So thanks, and I'll see you later.